There comes a moment in a man's life when silence becomes his teacher, solitude becomes his fuel, and the absence of a relationship becomes the birthplace of his greatest transformation. This isn't loneliness. This is power in its purest, most unfiltered form. There is a rare kind of strength that forms only in silence, only in the moments when a man is left alone with his own reflection and his own choices. Solitude forces honesty. It strips away all the distractions, expectations, and performances that come when you are surrounded by people. It reveals the real you, not the version polished for the world, not the version shaped by someone's approval, but the version that stands when no one is watching. And that version is the foundation of an unshakable identity. When a man spends time alone, he is pushed into a space where he must confront the questions most avoid. Who am I? What do I want? What do I fear? What beliefs do I hold because they are true? And what beliefs do I hold because someone else told me they were? These questions are uncomfortable, even intimidating, but they open the doorway to something incredibly powerful: clarity. Without clarity, a man drifts. He copies what others do. He reacts instead of creates. He seeks validation instead of direction. But when he begins to understand himself on a deeper level, confidence emerges from within, not from praise, status, or relationships. Solitude sharpens self-awareness in a way nothing else can. When you're alone, you see your habits without excuses. You recognize your strengths without exaggeration. You acknowledge your weaknesses without shame. You begin to see the patterns that need to break, the dreams you abandoned, the potential you've been ignoring. This awareness doesn't weaken a man, it builds him. Because once you understand yourself, you can improve yourself. You can make real decisions, not emotional ones. You can choose your path with conviction instead of hesitation. In this season of being alone, a man also learns to trust his own voice. The world is loud. Opinions, expectations, and comparisons bombard you from every direction. If you don't develop a strong inner voice, you get lost in that noise. But solitude gives space for that inner voice to grow stronger. It becomes the compass that guides you through life, the anchor that keeps you grounded when challenges come, the fuel that keeps you moving when others doubt you. A man who knows how to listen to himself becomes a man who doesn't need external validation to feel worthy. Another hidden advantage of solitude is the freedom it gives you to explore. When you're alone, you get to test your limits. You can fail without embarrassment. Try new things without judgment, reinvent yourself without hesitation. This freedom shapes your identity in ways relationships or constant company never will. You begin to choose based on curiosity instead of approval. You decide based on growth instead of comfort. You build a life that reflects your truth, not what society expects. And perhaps the most profound transformation comes from this: solitude teaches self-respect. When you're alone, you start to realize your time, your energy, your peace, and your dreams are valuable. You stop settling. You stop chasing people who don't see your worth. You stop saying yes just to be accepted. Self-respect becomes the shield that protects your identity from being shaped by anyone but you. At the core of it all, a man who stands alone learns that identity is not something given. It is something built through silence, through discipline, through honest reflection, through choosing growth over distraction. And when you cultivate that identity from within, no rejection, no relationship, no failure, and no opinion can ever take it away. That is the identity of a man who knows himself. And a man who knows himself becomes unstoppable. Discipline is the invisible force that separates a drifting man from a man who is building a life he can be proud of. When you live alone without a relationship to structure your day, there is no one checking on your goals, no one reminding you to stay consistent, no one to praise you when you do well. And that is exactly why discipline becomes your greatest advantage. It's forged in the quiet moments, in the empty rooms, in the spaces where most men would choose comfort over growth. When there's no one to impress, you learn to commit for the sake of your own evolution, and that is where true strength begins. A man who lives alone faces a unique challenge. Every choice is his alone, and every consequence is his alone. Without accountability from another person, many fall into laziness, distraction, and emotional stagnation. But the man who chooses discipline in this environment becomes unstoppable. He chooses to wake up early not because someone expects it, but because he expects it from himself. He chooses to train his body because he knows that physical strength fuels mental strength. He chooses to eat clean, manage his finances, build routines, and pursue his goals because he understands that no one is coming to save him, and no one needs to. Discipline becomes the engine that pushes him toward the life he wants, even on days he doesn't feel motivated. In solitude, discipline becomes personal. It's no longer about performing for a partner or proving something to people around you. You start to set standards simply because you refuse to let yourself down. You begin to take pride in the small victories. Finishing your workout, improving your skills, keeping your environment clean, mastering your emotions. These small habits, repeated consistently, create massive long-term results. They build confidence, not the temporary confidence that comes from compliments, but the deep internal confidence that grows from knowing you can rely on yourself. Discipline also creates structure, and structure is what keeps a man grounded. Without it, empty time turns into wasted time. Hours slip away. Dreams stay dreams. But when you build routines, set goals, and schedule your days with intention, you take control of your life. You eliminate the chaos that leads to anxiety and stagnation. You replace it with clarity, direction, and momentum. Structure gives you purpose each day, and purpose fuels discipline even further. It becomes a cycle that constantly elevates you. Perhaps the most transformative aspect is how discipline shapes your emotional resilience. When you stick to commitments even when you're tired, discouraged, or alone, you train your mind to push through resistance. You learn to master impulses, control reactions, and keep moving forward despite discomfort. A disciplined man becomes mentally untouchable. He stops seeking easy paths and starts choosing meaningful ones. He stops looking for external motivation and becomes his own source of power. And in the long run, discipline becomes the foundation for everything a man wants: success, stability, respect, confidence, and meaningful relationships. When you eventually choose to let someone into your life, you bring strength instead of neediness, direction instead of confusion, and value instead of dependency. You become a man who leads himself first, and that makes you a man capable of leading anything. Living alone isn't a disadvantage. It's an opportunity, a rare chance to build discipline without distraction. And the man who masters discipline in solitude becomes a man the world cannot break. There is a moment in a man's life when he realizes that the need for validation has been weighing him down more than any failure, fear, or setback ever could. When you live alone, without the influence or emotional pull of a relationship, you begin to discover something most men never reach for: the power of purpose. Purpose isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't flatter your ego. It simply sits within you, waiting for you to stop chasing the world long enough to hear it. And once you do, everything in your life begins to shift. Purpose replaces the need to be liked. It takes the place of approval. It fills the gaps you once tried to cover with attention, affection, or external reassurance. When you start building your life around meaning instead of validation, your actions become intentional. You stop doing things because you want someone to notice. You start doing them because they align with who you want to become. That shift is what turns an ordinary man into an extraordinary one. Living alone gives you the space to explore what truly drives you. You're no longer distracted by emotional highs and lows, no longer pouring energy into trying to impress someone, no longer shaping your identity around what you think someone else wants. Instead, you start asking deeper questions. What impact do I want to make? What kind of man do I want to be remembered as? What skills do I want to master? What kind of life do I want to build? These questions create the blueprint for purpose, and purpose creates the blueprint for destiny. When purpose takes root, your daily actions begin to change. You find yourself working later not because you feel pressured, but because you feel committed. You wake up earlier because you're excited about what you're building. You read more, learn more, train more, and focus more because your energy is no longer scattered. Your life becomes aligned, disciplined, and powerful. It's no longer about filling time. It's about investing it. Purpose also transforms your emotional world. Men who seek validation ride emotional roller coasters. Approval lifts them, criticism destroys them. But a man driven by purpose becomes steady. He doesn't crumble when someone doubts him. He doesn't panic when people pull away. He becomes grounded in who he is and where he's going. That stability becomes an entirely new form of confidence, one that can't be stolen or shaken because it comes from within. And there's something magnetic about a man who lives with purpose. Without trying, he inspires others. Without chasing, he attracts opportunities. Without forcing, he commands respect. People gravitate toward those who know where they're going, because most people don't. A purposeful man becomes a lighthouse, steady, bright, and impossible to ignore. But perhaps the greatest gift purpose gives a man is freedom. Freedom from insecurity. Freedom from comparison. Freedom from needing to prove anything to anyone. When you live for purpose, you no longer measure your worth by whether someone stays, leaves, compliments you, or rejects you. You see your value in your effort, your growth, your discipline, and your vision. That's the kind of freedom most men never experience because they never give themselves the time or solitude to discover it. Living alone isn't a void. It's an invitation. It's the space where purpose reveals itself to the man bold enough to look inward instead of outward. And once you anchor your life in purpose, every relationship, every decision, and every chapter ahead becomes richer, stronger, and more aligned with the man you were always meant to become.